Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Arkham Reporter channel. This time we're going to be doing another one of those videos where I basically give my thoughts, opinions and speculations about a short story of the weird fiction genre. Today we are going to be looking at the facts concerning the late Arthur Jermyn and his family, as requested by a certain subscriber of mine. And as per usual, this is going to be purely audio, so feel free to click away and do something else, just have a listen to what I have to say if you're interested. Yeah. Okay, the plot of the story. I don't think I'm going to spoil anything here really, because if you're a Lovecraft fan you probably are aware of what the plot is. But in short, there's this guy, Sir Wade Jermyn, the ancestor of Sir Arthur Jermyn, the protagonist of the story. Well, he's an explorer and he goes to darkest Africa on an exploration, and he finds this ancient sort of civilization of these half ape-like creatures which have white fur or something like that. I'm picturing some sort of Planet of the Apes type thing going on. And well, Sir Wade Jermyn, he's got a little bit of jungle fever, so basically he has sex with one of them, and then he brings her, he brings her back to, civilization basically, but keeps her hidden from all the servants, all his friends, all that sort of thing. But they do produce a child, which is the first in the line between Sir Wade Jermyn and Sir Arthur Jermyn, who came much later. 5 generations separate the two, I believe. And this is the beginning of the horror. The ending is quite clear. It's a classic Lovecraft thing. Madness, and the resulting thing, suicide because of the madness. The horror is just too much for the protagonist to take, and they choose death instead because there is no escape from the existential dread. Classic Lovecraft, very nice. This is definitely one of Lovecraft's earlier stories. I'm not saying that because it's any worse in its writing or its language that is used. I don't think it's primitive or inferior to the writing style he developed later on in life. Nothing like that. I'm just saying that it doesn't seem to have any connection to any of the sort of more grander themes in the later texts. I'll give you an example as to what really I mean. This is a very personal horror story. Now take the Shadow over Innsmouth, At the Mountains of Madness, The Call of Cthulhu. The threat there, the existential threat in those stories, is for all of humanity. Sure, the stories feature specific protagonists, but all of humanity is at risk there. Okay? The Deep Ones, they decide to bring war to the surface world or bring Shoggoths, we're fucked. At the Mountains of Madness, well, those mountains of madness, they are on Earth, and whatever Danforth saw in the plane that drove him insane, that thing is something we are all going to have to deal with. The Call of Cthulhu, as I love to mention always, if he wakes up, we're all screwed. Okay? But the horror in this story is very specific to the Arthur Jermyn character. All his previous ancestors are dead. There's only him. Okay? And the ape creatures, it is revealed later in the story, they have been wiped out by an African tribe. I'm talking like regular humans. They were so disgusted, these Africans, they were so disgusted by this ape sort of civilization and their sort of degeneracy or some sort of thing, that they basically destroyed the entire civilization, and the only thing that was remaining was the stuffed mummy that Arthur Jermyn ends up seeing later in the story, and that was the motive for him to kill himself. So even if these apes were still alive, they would just be down there in Africa. They would not be a threat like the Deep Ones would be, because they don't have any magical abilities, they don't have Shoggoths or anything. They were just basically minding their own business in the jungles. So there is no sort of threat there except to Arthur Jermyn himself. And for this reason, I think that this story is extremely, extremely autobiographical. And I'll give a few examples as to why this is very autobiographical to Lovecraft. The first reasoning is that from reading so many books about Lovecraft's biographical books and also his letters, I know that Lovecraft had a fear of inheriting genetic defects. And that's basically what the story is about. Inheriting something that's in your blood. Because if it's in your blood, you cannot kill it, you cannot erase it, it's part of you. That is, the symbolism of burning yourself with a fire. It's just to basically burn away everything, cleanse yourself. The expression that fire is cleansing, the holy fire, that sort of thing. So it's very symbolic that Arthur Jermyn chose fire to kill himself with instead of a gun or hanging or poison or something like that. He wanted to basically scrub himself clean of this filth that was in his blood. While Lovecraft, sadly, while he was completely sane and stable and extraordinarily intelligent and sensitive and a great human being, while in his family, his mother, well, she died in an asylum. His father, he died in an asylum. So there's some reason there for Lovecraft to have his fears. The confinement of Robert Jermyn, which was the grandson of Sir Wade Jermyn, I believe, and the grandfather of Arthur Jermyn, I know it's complex, but try and stick with me, mirrors his father's confinement and death. You see, in the story, Robert Jermyn, basically, he finds out the truth about his genetics and he goes nuts. He gets locked up in an asylum, he's screaming, and then he cannot really communicate, and he just carries on like that for 2 years, 3 years, and then he kills himself. Or he just dies of... No, he doesn't kill himself, he dies of some sort of euphemistically, nicely way to put it. You know, he died of exhaustion or something. I forget the exact description in the text, but what happened to Sir Wade Jermyn is what happened to his father. His father died of syphilis, basically, but what Lovecraft was told was also something very euphemistic, you know. So the death of Sir Wade Jermyn mirrors the death of his father. S.C. Joshi also pointed this out, but I also did know this just from my own readings. There was another point here that was quite autobiographical that I thought, and also, actually no, this one I didn't figure out for myself. I have to admit I found this in S.C. Joshi's notes, was that in the beginning of the story, Sir Wade Jermyn, when he brings back his horrific half-monkey African albino wife, however you want to call it, he kept her confined inside, you know, away from the eyes of civilization, because he knew that she would be so disgusting and so repulsive to civilization that it would cause a shock, and he wanted to avoid that. Now, it has been reported that Lovecraft's mother treated him like that. She treated Lovecraft like that. There was many, I've read many sort of passages and letters where it said that, you know, that she talked continuously of how grotesque Lovecraft's face was, how he had these ingrowing hairs and he was just ugly to look at, and you know, it would be best if he just stayed inside and away from the gaze of people. So clearly Lovecraft kept that in mind when he was writing the story and his characters, you know. It's really a shame that she treated him like that, but she was also, I mean, she died in a nut house, so I guess she wasn't really that stable either. There was one line in the story that really sort of was very autobiographical. If you read Lovecraft's stories, there are many lines that occasionally pop out in his text where you think, oh man, he's writing about himself. This is one of those occasions. So in the story, it goes to the point where it starts discussing Arthur Jermyn, the protagonist, who clearly Lovecraft is, you know, sort of using as a proxy for himself. It says here of Arthur Jermyn, he was not like any other Jermyn who had ever lived, for he was a poet and a dreamer. I've heard Lovecraft use this sort of terminology quite a few times regarding his protagonist. You know, he was a poet and a dreamer. The one that comes to mind is Cellar Face. That was another short story which I'm definitely going to be looking at, where it talks about one of the characters there, Kuranes, who was the protagonist, and it says of Kuranes was not modern, and he did not think like the others who wrote. You know, it's clearly setting the protagonist as being different and sort of more cut from a different cloth. So this is another autobiographical point here, you know, saying that this story really is a personal horror for Lovecraft, you know. One point that I did think of that wasn't in the notes by S.T. Joshi was that if you look at the genealogical tree of the Jermyn family, starting with Sir Wade Jermyn and then going down 5 generations to Sir Arthur, is that there's not really much there to look at in regards to prestige, okay? I read a letter from Lovecraft where he said, he was lamenting that in his family, although he's very proud of his race and his ethnicity and, the good solid English stock from whence he came, there's no one there ready to be impressed by. There was no scientists, there was no great thinkers, there was no great writers or poets, nothing like that. There were there were some priests, some very average Joes like clerks, shopkeepers and that sort of thing, businessmen, nothing that really appealed to him. And if you look at the family tree of Sir Arthur Jermyn, a lot of the people that the Jermyn men end up marrying are basically, in Lovecraft's eyes, inferior people. There was like a daughter of some Portuguese trader, the daughter of a gamekeeper who was a gypsy, of all things, then a music hall singer of unknown origin, that sort of thing. Nothing that Lovecraft would really feel proud of. It sort of mirrors that Lovecraft sort of like wishing, he would wish that in his family tree there was something more to be proud of. He sort of turns up the intensity of this notion to 11 by saying, it's circus hall performers and gypsies and Portuguese traders, that sort of thing. That's sort of Lovecraft's bias coming through there. It should also be noted that this fear of inherited genetic defects is not just seen in this story, it's seen in a few stories. The first one that comes to mind is obviously The Shadow over Innsmouth, right? The deep ones, right? The ones with the Innsmouth look. Basically, the thing that is to be considered a horror is in your blood. Now tell me, how do you get rid of that, Even, worst case scenario, Cthulhu wakes up. In that situation, you can at least think, how do we combat him? If we can remove Cthulhu from the equation, we can all go back to being a civilization. Humanity can go on. Yay. Obviously, it's not going to happen, but, you can at least think, let's try something, But in this case, the horror is in your blood. How do you get rid of something that is in your blood, that is a part of you? Basically, it is you. You don't want it to be a part of you, but there's not much you can really do. It's in your genetics, it's in your DNA. Again, I think I mentioned it earlier in this video, this is why fire was so symbolic in the suicide of Sir Arthur Jermyn, because fire is cleansing, it's a way to, it's probably the best way to destroy something, like viruses, they can die in fire. It's a way to remove disease as well, is that not so? Boiling destroys bacteria and water, so this sort of idea of a heat, fire, it will kill and scrub clean everything that is dirty. So that's basically all my thoughts about the story. I do read it on occasion, more often than some other stories, I think it's really personal, I think it's really autobiographical of Lovecraft. I like the setup about how it starts out with the ending. Basically, yes, it says Arthur Jermyn killed himself, and then it displays the facts as to what the hell, what led up to this case. It's very technical and factual and that sort of thing. And then you end up thinking, so what? What's the big deal? I still don't understand why Arthur Jermyn killed himself. And then the final sentence, the final paragraph, then it all starts clicking. And Lovecraft does that famous thing where the ending is basically, this is the explanation why, and then bang, the horror comes to you. Like, yes, I understand now. That is really good, I love that sort of format that Lovecraft does. He does that over and over again, many, many times, in his stories. As to, the statement of Randolph Carter also is like that. It starts with the ending, and then the ending where the things underground, they say, "You fool, Warren is dead," and it's like bang, oh, there's the horror. That's typical of Lovecraft, not just in his early stories, but also in the latter stories, like in The Whisperer in Darkness, where it's found out that the Professor Akeley was actually Amigo the whole time. That last sentence. It's so classic Lovecraft. That's why I really like it. It's really cool. It's a great story. Highly recommended it. I highly recommend it if you're new to Lovecraft. Sorry if I spoiled it for you, but I think the majority of the audience already knows what's what here. So yeah, that's all I have to say really. If there's another story that you would like me to have a look at, I'll happily do it. The one with the most votes or the most comments asking for that story, if I have it in my library or I can find it online, I'll read it and I'll give my opinion. Anyway, thanks for listening to me, and I hope to come back to you with some more content very, very soon. Cheers.